Throughout the ages, women have given birth. These days, it's something that happens at a hospital, and we have been conditioned to think of that as the normal way birth happens. The days of birthing at home with the older women of our families assisting us is long behind us, and many believe for the better. The question remains, is that the better way? Today's guest is a certified postpartum doula, childbirth educator, and advanced lactation counselor. She is certified in spinning babies' birth practices and is passionate about helping to prevent birth trauma. She offers online breastfeeding and childbirth courses and has an incredible podcast, which is available on Apple and Spotify, called Empowered Birth, Love and Life. I am so thrilled to welcome Emmy Robbin to the show. Emmy, thank you so much for making the time to join me for this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
This is a topic that I have been thinking about, even though I am not pregnant, I don't have children. It has always interested me, this whole sort of divide that we have with mothers, home birth versus hospital birth. What is a crunchy mum? Because I hear this term on social media, and I'm assuming the crunchy mums are the ones that are doing the home births or leaning in that direction. So can you just clarify what that is?
Yeah, I mean, look, crunchy can be what you want to make it, but for the most part, crunchy is leading a more homeopathic, holistic, nature-based life, meaning you're going to try to cut out chemicals in your detergent or your dishwasher soap or your body soap or your shampoos. It doesn't mean that you're just like bathing in patchouli oil, but to me, the crunchy mom is looking at the back of the food labels before they're giving their children the food, or researching the ingredients in things before ingesting them or injecting them. Most of the women in the crunchy community, I would say, tend to want to birth in an undisturbed, unmedicated fashion. I see many crunchy women still birthing in the hospital system. But they're, oh, I'm gonna go do it all natural, but in the hospital, I found a really great all natural OB, and you know what I mean? So
Isn't it crazy that a woman saying she wants an unmedicated natural birth is seen as being such a crazy phenomenon and thought?
yeah. I mean, we're taught to fear the pain of childbirth from when we're little. Childbirth really is a transformative, joyous, beautiful experience that women, we are given that rite of passage.
And once upon a time, it really was this tribal sort of thing where the elders would come together and support a younger woman going through this process. And that really has gone out the window. I realize that some women do have their mums present. And on your podcast, you talk about whether it's a party in the birthing room or if people are going to be a hindrance. And we'll get into that because I want to talk about the fear that is
Yeah.
installed in the birth trauma and what have you. But we really have devolved from that beautiful moment where it's almost like passing the torch and supporting the next generation to
Yeah.
stepping back and just going, this is how we do it now.
Yeah. I mean, it is really cool. Like birth is, I don't know, man. It's like between Hollywood and between the, medical system just really taking over birth. I mean, back to, you know, we could go back to all the way back, to where birth actually got interfered with and became super medicalized. But it's just it's a really, really cool, beautiful, spiritual experience, and it's been made to just be like another day.
You're a doula. What
Yeah.
is the role of a doula? Are you similar to a midwife? Can you sort of go into exactly what it is you do?
Yeah, and I mean, lately, I'm even questioning if I want to continue calling myself a doula, right? I have all these certifications on the wall behind the computer that you can't see, but yeah, as a certified birth doula, Her role is to be the support person for the mother, whether that's emotional, physical, educational support, just that kind of sister motherly presence that you would want. There's a back and forth whether or not a doula should be an advocate for you or not. I am on the side of yes, they should, especially if you're birthing in a hospital. I believe that a doula should 1000% be the clear head in the room because we've seen it all. We know we know the language, we know all the things. So that what you would call that is in the community, they call that a free birth. Don't have a midwife. I have been a part of one of those births before and actually ended up catching the baby, but it was not by choice. It was by she had a like 59-minute birth from her first contraction to the baby out. And
Wow.
I lived 14 minutes away from her. And so her boyfriend called me and was like, she just woke up and sat on the toilet and now she like can't get off the toilet.
Midwives, do they tend to be more medical minded? Are they closer towards the crunchy sort of way of doing things? So I'll ask you that before I get into the video that I saw.
Yeah, so there is in the community what we call midwives. And those are the midwives that, in my opinion, carry trauma and fear with them into every single birth, meaning they think like obstetricians. They think I can manage this, I can control the birth to where something bad doesn't happen. And through that control, that iatrogenic care, right? We're doing something to prevent something, but it actually causes something, right? These women either tend to get transferred or, some bad stuff happens. When you leave birth alone, 99.9% of the time, it tends to go really well. So traditional midwives, unlicensed midwives that have been practicing midwifery for years, they're elders, they're traditional midwives. Those are the gold. Those are like the creme de la creme. They're usually in a corner knitting a scarf, they're in the next room taking a nap, they're like listening, they'll like wake up when they hear the sounds that they need to hear. They've just been doing it for so long that they understand that labor needs to be completely undisturbed for it to work out beautifully. The midwives are the ones that, as you're getting close to your due date, they're asking if you want cervical sweeps, or they're telling you can start, taking some castor oil, or just they'll just start introducing inductions in a natural way. And then in labor, they'll want a cervical check you so that they can see where you're at because they want to get a picture of what's going on. And with that, what is that? That's their fear.
And I was watching both British and American way of giving birth.
Yeah.
And it's very, very different. And I was talking to her about the different things because I would watch this show, cry, and then have to call her and tell her about what I had just witnessed. And she said to me, people tear when they're scared. So when you need to breathe and relax is when they tense up, and that is what causes the tearing. And that has always stuck with me because I have some friends that are crunchy mums. I've got plenty of friends that have delivered in hospitals, and listening to their stories, the women that have not torn are the ones that were so mentally prepared for it. They did the meditations and what have you to help them through labor.
You get to 10 centimeters and you're fully effaced, you're fully soft. You don't have to start pushing the baby out. And in the hospital, when they're like, oh, you're complete, let's push. The body doesn't do that naturally. Like it does all this work to get to 10 centimeters. And sometimes the baby takes like a 2-hour nap and everything stops. And they call it the rest phase. And then your body will start fetal ejecting that baby out. That's called precipitous birth. Those really fast, really beautiful, just mom dilates, everything, boop, baby comes out, and that's usually our anatomy is very similar to that of our mothers. Now, if you're listening or watching and your mother had a C-section or a doctor scared her and said, oh, you have too small of a pelvis, you can't have a vaginal baby, I would love for you to talk to me, because just because, you were born via C-section doesn't mean anything. I've had a C-section baby, and I've had a home birth after my C-section baby. And I was told by my obstetrician that, oh, you would never be able to have a baby over 8 pounds. And my second daughter was 8 pounds and 2 ounces. So I've part of me has wanted to go back to her office. I haven't been back since my first daughter. I've wanted to go back and be like, VBAC, the one you told me not to have. She's right here. Thank you very much.
Because you're an advocate for the natural labor, and again, it's not that you're anti-intervention, you're not anti-doctor, you're not anti-hospital, it's just you also believe in trusting a woman's body and the way we've been birthing for thousands of years.
Yes.
But being that you're an advocate for all of those things, how does the hospital system treat you? And that is the nurses, midwives that are in hospitals, and the obstetricians.
They pretend to like me. I mean, I'm different than most doulas, though. I mean, I've always been a rebel. I've always been an outcast. I've always been an advocate for the underdog. If I'm witnessing abuse, or if I'm hearing language that is extremely gaslighty, I will say something, because I can't not say something and then have a mom end up in a C-section because she was gaslit into doing the Pitocin, which I know stresses out the baby. And if I can keep the mom off of the Pitocin and keep that natural oxytocin flowing, then everything should hopefully be good. They don't like that. They're like, oh, they're used to the doulas who are taking hospital births quite a bit, so they have to play nice, and it's kind of like a chummy oh. But if it's me, they're not happy because I'm keeping them out of the room. Yeah, you can come in and check her. We're not doing the wired monitors around her belly. You're going to give us the wireless. I don't do hospital birth anymore. You're right. I don't. I transfer if a mom needs to transfer. They pretend. They're all BSers. They pretend to like doulas, but they don't. We're just inhibiting them from putting more money on the bill. It's like they could easily just get the mom in there, get the epidural, get the Pitocin, stress the baby out, take her to the OR, cut the baby out. We're good. On to the next room, burn and turn that hospital room. But when you have a doula, you're most likely trying to do a natural childbirth, which, not interfering with labor, it's going to take a little bit longer, but that's what is supposed to happen. We're not supposed to stress this baby out and make them come super fast. You don't want that. Trust me. I just did a podcast episode of my own with a childbirth attorney who deals with fetal and maternal death because of, she said it in her book, Pitocin. It's the number one thing in all of her cases. It's a common across the board Pitocin. Long story short, sorry. Yeah, the hospitals hate doulas. I think, in my personal opinion, I feel like unless a midwife is truly a traditional in full physiological trust of birth, all of that, they understand how beneficial a mom having a doula is, and it makes their job easier. It should make their job easier. They should be able to show up, catch a baby, do all the support, and leave. But some midwives don't like doulas either. And that's a sign. If your midwife is telling you you don't need a doula, that's a sign of a bad midwife.
Fear that is put onto mothers. And there's two layers to this. There is the medical fear that people are getting from their routine checkups, from things that the doctors are saying. And then there's a second layer, which is other people putting their birth trauma onto the mother. You have talked about on your podcast the fear of the size of the baby, which so many of my friends, when booking in their gentle C-section, have said, my baby's too big for me to give birth to. I cannot deliver this child. You have the fear of you've talked about the bait and switch in terms of women going in and speaking to their OBGYN and saying, I want a natural birth. And all through the pregnancy, the doctor is all on board. And at the last minute, They find something that is concerning or alarming, and all of a sudden that goes out the window. And there's so many more things.
Yeah.
How does a mother navigate all of that to be able to stay present and in trust of what her body's built to do?
Listen to my podcast. I mean, it really is about empowering and educating yourself. And I'm not talking about taking just, the Mama Natural childbirth course, right? Like I'm not talking about taking a hospital childbirth course or even hypnobirthing, right? Like women are like, well, I took a hypnobirthing course, and so I feel very prepared to do this home birth. Like hypnobirthing is a tool. That is a tool that you use within childbirth. Some women take a hypnobirthing childbirth course, and the hypnobirthing goes out the freaking door when they're in childbirth. Go listen to the Free Birth Society, man. Those women know, like they know what's normal and how to not be messed with, but you don't have to go that far off the spectrum. It doesn't have to be free birth to hospital or hospital to free birth. There is home birth in between there with a medical, not medical, but a medical professional, yeah, a midwife who understands how to intervene when intervention is needed. The maternal and fetal mortality rate that we have here in the United States is numbers that are taken from our hospital system, and we are on the worst end of the spectrum in the whole world. I'm talking like we're up there with, the slums, man, like the United States, this place that has amazing medicine, and we are in the lowest of the low when it comes to birth outcome. And it's not taken from home birth numbers. You know what I mean? Like they'll use that one home birth scary thing to scare everybody, but are we talking about the 20 deaths that happened at the hospital in the past year? You know what I mean? No, it's horrible. It's horrible what's happening. And they will use dead baby to push something that could potentially actually cause a dead baby.
Just before we get to the birth trauma of others and them putting that onto expectant mothers, I feel like in between the medical establishment, and this sort of falls into the media, and then the personal stories, I watched at your suggestion, The Business of Being Born, which is a Ricki Lake documentary. It was made in 2008, and it was about how she wanted a home birth. She'd had a hospital birth. She wanted to do something differently. And she interviewed a whole range of OBGYNs, registered nurses, midwives, a whole lot. I did not expect to see Ricki Lake giving birth, and yet there she was, and I loved every minute of it. It was such a fantastic documentary, and just the sheer figures that were put out during that. And we're going to get to figures because I was Googling again last night, trying to get more up-to-date figures, because 2008 is obviously a few years ago now. But when I was on YouTube and searching for videos, a clip came up of Ricki Lake appearing on The Doctors talking about her documentary. Now, I could not find the entire segment. I found a 3.5-minute segment, and I was horrified watching this. They were so rude to her. I think in this clip, she got maybe 3 to 5 words in, because they were essentially chastising her for pushing this narrative about home birth. And again, it was, I've seen what can happen. I work in third world countries, dead baby, dead baby, dead baby. And I'm sitting there thinking, you're not listening to her speak. And the few words she managed to get out were talking about where America sits with the fetal mortality rate, and the fact that we are ranked one of the lowest in the Western world, in the developed world. And yet we have the greatest resources and interventions open to us. Why is that? And you can't blame home birth, because at the time in 2008, 0.5% of the population were having home births. Then we go to the trauma that other women have experienced. And before I get your thoughts, because you talk about your dislike for baby showers, because it's generally when women sit around and talk about their birth trauma, for the expectant mother right before she's about to go in and give birth, 4 to 6 weeks away.
At a baby shower, if I hear someone tell a birth trauma story, I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, that's horrible. And then I want to like project to everybody that she just actually let me break her birth down really, really quick. If you want to go in the other room and don't want to hear, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I get into this, like, I want to do this so bad, but I just sit and I smile and I say, oh yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that's what your birth was, that's not what I experience as with my job as a doula. I help women have these incredible births, and I think birth is really awesome, and that's kind of how I end it, right? So what I have to do is I have to hear their birth story and watch them. So I study their behavior. I look at their eye movement. So I'm certified in somatic EMDR, and I study their eye movement. I watch if their jaw tenses up. I watch if they close their eyes or they like look up when they start telling a certain part. So I'm watching them as they tell their birth story. And when I see them get really dysregulated, kind of like your friend, that was no, 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 no. I needed it. This is what I needed, right? And I start to see them come out of their window of tolerance, or their nervous system's getting dysregulated. I'll kind of, let's pause and let's get your nervous system regulated again. And through that, I will start to tell them what I'm hearing about their birth story, and break it down. So if it's, well, they just kept checking me, and then they kept saying that I wasn't, dilating anymore. And so, it's like they gave me like, 10 hours to dilate some more. And you know what I mean? And then they added Pitocin, and then the baby's heart rate got right. And so I'll stop and I'll say, hold on, hold on, hold on. In all of that time, like you're having a hand go in your vagina, which is probably freaking your body out. And then you're relying on numbers to tell you where you are in labor. And did you have a doula? Did you have somebody there that was, helping the mood, and was your husband kissing you and loving on you and giving you oxytocin, or was he sleeping on the hospital couch while you know what I mean? So I have to break everybody's birth is so different and unique. It's little things like, did someone come in and say something to you? Oh, yeah, I remember. Like they'll things, memories that they've suppressed from. I mean, I work with a mom from 17 years ago. I helped the other day, 17 years ago. She didn't realize how dysregulated she's been, and her daughter has, and I was like, you guys are gonna heal this together. But birth trauma, by the way, doesn't mean dead baby. It means like, I attempted to do a home birth, and the midwife transferred me when I didn't feel like I needed a transfer, but she kept telling me that something was wrong, and I didn't feel like something was wrong. It's your autonomy being taken away. It's your choice and your autonomy being taken away. Yes, it's so hard for me to go to baby showers. I mean, I was at the park the other day with my two toddlers, and the two women sitting in front of me on the little grassy hill, where one of them was talking about her birth trauma to the other one, and the other one was like, yeah, I don't know, we're thinking about trying for another, but I don't know. And I'm like, whoa, 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 stop telling your birth trauma to this. It's like I hear it and I see it everywhere. There's just so many women just sharing their birth trauma. And I get it. Like, yes, we should be able to share our birth trauma, but find a skilled practitioner to help you, somebody who can actually help you process that trauma, right? Whether it means going to an actual therapist, a licensed therapist who specializes in birth trauma. I'm not a licensed therapist, but I am certified in somatics, and I know that what I tell a mother can heal a mother.
We talked briefly before about the United States having one of the highest fetal mortality rates, but is it France and Sweden that are doing so much better than us? What is it that they're doing differently to what the US is doing?
They're midwifery led. So the midwives handle all the births, and the OBs only step in when they're needed. It's better than what's happening here. So obviously they're doing something right.
Show one born every minute. I watched it. I could have sworn it was in the early 2000s, but the British version that I found last night, I think ran from maybe 2008 or 2010. And I think there are episodes up until about 2012. But what I remember being the biggest difference was in the UK, they encouraged mothers to labor naturally. They would only give an epidural in very rare cases. And if the mother was really just not able to keep going, exhaustion, which is something you talk about a lot, rest is the greatest gift you can give yourself and your body, especially in early labor, to be able to be strong enough to get to the other side. And you talk about how exhaustion is normally what leads to those transfers.
Yep.
In the US, though, when the parents would get to the hospital and the parents are having a great time, they're talking to the nurses, all of that. But the first question before mum's even in the bed, before she's even hooked up to a monitor is, what time do you want your epidural? It's not, do you want to do it naturally? It's how long do you want to wait before you get the pain relief?
Yeah.
And I remember sitting back and watching that and thinking, this is crazy. And one of the things with one birth in the UK, this woman was just saying, I can't do it. I'm in so much pain. And she was getting very close to the ring of fire where baby's head is about to come out. And the midwife, an older Russian or Eastern European woman, says, 1 minute. And she goes out of the room and she comes back with a massive basin of almost boiling hot water, a whole bunch of face cloths, and she just starts rotating the face cloths, putting that on the woman's vagina. And it was instant relief for this woman. And she just kept this rotation going to get her through that moment of pain. And that wasn't anything like what I saw in the US. So last night, because I want to talk about the cost of a doula, but we sort of say, why is it happening this way? Why are we being pushed towards the hospital system? And the business of being born heavily focuses on this, but it's a way to earn money for the doctors. With every pair of gloves that the OB puts on or the nurses put on, you're being charged for that. Every medication you're given, whether you want it or not, you're being charged for it. So the average cost of a vaginal birth in the US is $11,453. The average cost of a C-section is $17,103. But then, as I kept reading, the average cost without insurance for birth and delivery can range from $3,000 to $37,000. And then no insurance for a C-section can run from $8,000 to $71,000.
Mine was $89,000 with Adeline.
Wow.
Because of the complications that happened from the C-section. I had an ileus, which means my bowels stopped, my whole intestinal tract stopped working for 4 days. They had to put me on a magnesium drip, and I had to pray that I wasn't going to end up on dialysis, that my kidneys were going to shut. Like, so much crazy stuff happened because of the C-section, right? So I ended up being in the hospital for a week. And so they just charged. Yeah. But because I got a hospital advocate, ended up paying zero, but it would have been $89,000. And that was after I paid the birth center their money. A midwife typically runs between $5,000 and $5,500. A doula runs between, $1,500 to $2,000. Depending on their experience and what they're offering for you. So I charge $22.22, but what do you get with $22.22, right? You're going to get like access to me 24/7, second week contract. And I'm telling you, like, people will text me at 3 a.m. I'm like, please text me between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. unless it's an emergency. Like, don't be like, my butthole hurts, at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? Like, that can wait till the morning, but it's usually one-on-one coaching. It's access to me 24/7. Total for midwife and doula should be somewhere around $7,000, which is still less than a hospital birth.
And people assume that a home birth means you've got no medical help if you need it, which is absolutely untrue. The midwives come with oxygen and Pitocin if you need it, not to induce labor or anything like that, but for hemorrhaging after the fact,
Yep.
uterine hemorrhaging, things like that.
Yeah.
So, and they've also got sutures to stitch you up if you were to get a tear, all these different things. So these women, for that money, are coming fully stocked.
Well, it's also a lot of people will ask me, how do I get my ultrasounds? How do I get my blood work? How do I get my labs? How do they test for this? The midwives do phlebotomy. They'll draw your blood for you. They sometimes have their own like little mini ultrasound machines. They Doppler every prenatal. They're listening to the baby. But they usually have like an ultrasound technician that they work with. So you can go get your ultrasounds. And if you have health insurance, all of your labs, all of your ultrasounds, all of those things are run through your health insurance. So it would be the exact same as if you were with your OB.
We are seeing a huge increase in cesarean births. So, do I have the rates here? I do. In 2022, in the US, we were at 32.1%. That was the figure I could find. I don't know if you think it's different. So they're saying 22.5 per 100 live births, but you're shaking your head. Higher? What, what
Eh.
sort of rates are we looking at?
I mean, to me, like if it's reported 32, that's probably an average across the nation. But
Mm-hmm.
there's some areas that are like 60%, 70%. I saw an uptake in just wheeling women back to C-sections. I remember I was in 2021, I was at a hospital here. I was helping a mom have a VBAC. She had had an unnecessary C-section. We broke that down and she was having her VBAC and I was so excited for her. And she was doing it all natural. I mean, like nothing. Like she didn't have anything. She was just laboring all natural. And anytime they kept coming in, they'd be like, how you guys doing? Do you need anything? I'd be like, nope, we're good. So they left us alone because I think she was the only one that had an actual doula with her. There was about 13 women on the floor laboring because I asked the nurse. The nurse was like so cute and young and new and was just spewing information that she probably shouldn't have been. And I was just like, how many women do you guys have tonight? Like laboring, what's going on? She's like, oh, 13, and I'm like, oh, cool. And I never saw the OB the whole time. It was always the nurses popping in and I never saw the OB. So I kept, asking like, is the OB gonna come in? Oh, she's in surgery right now. She'll be back. She's in surgery. She'll be back. I mean, for like 5 hours that we were there. Like we labored at home. So we got there like she was 7 centimeters when she got checked in. So she was about to push a baby out. And like 5 hours later, we were probably complete. And she started to say she felt pushy. And we still hadn't seen the OB. OB had just been in C-section, C-section, C-section. Thank God, because this mom was a VBAC. And if the OB had even looked at her chart, she probably would have been on the list to go back in the OR too. Mom has amazing vaginal birth. OB just like pops in, washes her hands, comes in, catches the baby, leaves. I asked the nurse in postpartum because I went with them to postpartum. When we got to the postpartum floor, they get a new nurse. And the nurse, and we're telling her, oh, she just had a VBAC. She just had her vaginal. And the nurse said, oh, wow, you're our first vaginal birth tonight that we've received. 13 women labored that night. 11 of them were C-sections.
And learning about how the hospitals charge, because in my naivety, I always thought that the cost of birth would essentially be, okay, this is what it is. If it's a vaginal birth, this is what it is. If it's a C-section, and that's it. But the fact that they're charging for every little thing, and obviously hospitals are a for-profit business. That is what they are. They work with the insurance companies that are also a for-profit business.
Yeah.
So there is a whole system at work. And I get that some people would possibly call me a conspiracy theorist, but to me, it sounds like a money grab.
Oh, it is. I mean, that's why it's
It,
called the business of being born. I mean, that's exactly what it's a business. I mean, so that VBAC mom in particular that I was talking about, she got her hospital bill and she was like, what? And so she asked for a breakdown of the bill. She's like, I refuse to pay this. I refuse to pay this. And it like went to collections. And she was like, no, I've asked the hospital for a breakdown. So collections called the hospital, was like, you gotta send this woman a breakdown. She gets a breakdown of her bill because she was like, why is it I had like this is crazy. Um, on it, $2,300 the line, it was like the vaginal birth was like 4,700, right? It said vaginal birth, 4,700. And then there was like a bunch of other stuff, a glove, a this, a that. And then $2,300, it said VBAC. So because she was a VBAC, she was getting charged an extra $2,300 to have that baby out. Her birth was just like a regular normal vaginal birth. They didn't do anything special or different. As a matter of fact, they didn't really even have to do much because we labored at home for most of it. That's why she was like, what are you charging me? They charged her for like 100 Tylenol. They were charging like, and she was like, I didn't take a single Tylenol. I don't know how that got on my bill. So midwives, they do that. They'll do your annuals for you. Like I said, they do labs. They can, if you're having hormone issues and you're trying to get pregnant and you just want to get your blood taken, you don't have to go to your OB. You can go to a midwife and say, can you run a hormone panel on me for me? I'm trying to get pregnant. I want to see what's going on. And then you establish a relationship with a midwife and say, look, I'm trying to conceive. I'm in my 40s. Would you support this? Would you be my midwife? And you can find through those kinds of questions their reaction, like are they a fully supportive traditional type midwife, But postpartum, as soon as that baby comes out, your body will naturally flood you even more with oxytocin in order to help you bond with this baby so that you don't eat your baby. Because mammals in the wild, there's some of them that will eat their babies, right? So nature, God, created this natural flood of oxytocin as soon as we're birthed to flood us so that we instantly fall in love with this baby and we bond with this baby. Now, again, there's a lot of women that talk about not bonding with their babies until they're like 4. It happened with me in my first. It happens all the time. And that means that somewhere along your birth process, your oxytocin was disrupted, right? The bond will come. You just need to like love on your baby, breastfeed, however else you can find your bonding with your baby. It will come, hopefully. You don't have severe PPD.
Even in 2008, and so this is obviously based in US hospitals and specifically in New York because that's where Ricky Lake was living at the time.
Yeah.
But they talk about getting every single mother onto Pitocin. Every single mother. There is a moment where they're looking at the board and it says pit, 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 pit. And they said a pit mum is Pitocin. And it's really just how quickly can we get her on it. And I think about all of this because I don't know a single woman that I know that's given birth that has talked about being given informed consent in terms of understanding the complications of Pitocin.
Yeah, that's where it started, was with King Louis, and he wanted all the women that birthed his babies to lay on their backs so that he could see. And yeah, it's a horrible position. I mean, it works sometimes, but it should not be used 100% of the time. 95% of the time, hands and knees or on our side where our sacrum bone is not being pushed in. That's like that much less room that the baby has, right? It's just, I mean, you're not using gravity. A baby has to come up like this, has to get under the pubic, but when you're on your back, the baby has to go under the pubic bone and go up like this. So if you're on your hands and knees, then the baby has to go down, right? The baby's going down. So if you're on your hands and knees giving birth, that's using gravity. And if you're on your back, they have to like go up. So it's just, it makes no sense. It's so much harder. It's so much harder to give birth on your back.
I do have a girlfriend that had an ambulance baby. And so she had her first baby at home with a midwife who was a family friend, completely trusted. Second time round, 36 hours in, she was exhausted and she'd been pushing and pushing and the baby just would not move past a certain point. And the midwife said, it's time to make the call. And she said, no. And she said, but I looked at my midwife and I know her well enough that the look said, we have to go. And she said, and I trusted her enough that that's what we did. Turns out baby was hitting a nerve on mum's back. And that was why she couldn't push her past a certain point. So the ambulance turns up, they give her the green stick to just help reduce the pain while they're getting her to the hospital. That green stick was enough to just get her past that moment.
Yeah.
They get to the hospital. Midwife is in the ambulance with her. Dad is following. And they get to the hospital and she's pushing this baby out, and the ambulance workers were going, absolutely not, absolutely not. You're not having this child in the ambulance. She's screaming at them, I am not having it in the hallway of the hospital. And the
Yeah.
reality was it was going to be a lot of paperwork for them. That's why they didn't want her to have it in the
Yep.
ambulance. So then the midwife kicked the ambulance officers out of their own vehicle. She's birthing this child. Dad runs up. He leaves his car somewhere. He runs up to the ambulance, and the officers go, no, no, no. Dad picks them up and physically moves them out of the way, gets in, gets to watch his son be born. And at that point, the hospital said, well, we can't hold you here because you didn't have your baby here. What do you want to do? She said, I'd like a shower and to go home. And they went, okay. And that was it. I have been curious about this question for about 8 days.
Yeah.
You talk about your dislike for castor oil because some people use castor oil for induction. Now, the way I use castor oil is very, very different. So,
Oh,
are
I
you
love it topically. I
okay? So,
love it
so that
topically.
was going to be my question.
Yeah.
I
No,
use it for
ingesting it.
a liver
Yeah.
cleanse, a thyroid cleanse, my skin, lymphatic massage, all of that.
Mastitis, I praise castor oil packs for mastitis. You put some castor oil on a cloth, you put it over the affected area, you put some heat, you let the baby nurse or you pump. It can cure quickly. So quickly it'll get rid of mastitis. Like it's amazing. Ingesting it to bring a baby is gross. That's disgusting. That's poison. Why are you putting that in your body? That's stupid. Because the whole reason it causes labor to quote unquote start, and some people it doesn't, and then you just have horrible diarrhea for like 4 days. It's awful. And if you're taking something that makes you poop yourself, guess what? Guess what? Baby is probably also pooping. It's painful. It gives you like these horrible cramps. Like it's just not fun. Like why? Why would you? Why?
And what are your thoughts on lotus birth, which is when, for anyone that doesn't know, is when mum leaves the placenta attached and for a week will keep the placenta in a bowl and that bowl goes everywhere with baby? Because there are very strong opinions on both sides of this.
I to each his own. There, I mean, I will tell you like the pros is, you're being as naturally as you can, right? You're sticking to is about like what you would do in nature, right? But I mean, even in nature, I feel like some mammals would chew the umbilical cord off, right? Like monkeys and stuff. Um, but lotus birth, it's just kind of like a tribute to the placenta and the beautiful work that it did. And but it does smell. It's an organ and it starts to really stink. I mean, it smells like a dead animal. So you have to carry this bowl with this organ anywhere you go and sleep with it as well. So you're sleeping with this bowl that has a bloody organ in it. So like if you accidentally knock it, there's blood everywhere, it just is what it is. But you have to put like herbs and flowers and oils and all these things in with the placenta so that it doesn't reek horribly.
Home birth rates, we sort of alluded to this earlier. Back when the business of being born was made in 2008, the home birth rate was 0.5%. So in 2021, the rate went up to 1.41%, which is the highest level since 1990. And I was curious as to your thoughts, if you think that is in large part to what happened with COVID.
Oh, absolutely. People didn't want to go birth in the hospital, like and there was even hospitals that weren't allowing the husband to even be present, right? There was in New York, they were having women, their husbands would drop them off at the in front of the emergency room. The woman would go up and have the baby, and the husband would hope that they survived and didn't get COVID, and then they get released and come home. But they weren't even allowed one support person during COVID. It's definitely because of COVID for sure. But also, I mean, social media, you have access to more information. I know Instagram, there's a lot of like, you can see natural birth videos. I love that Instagram does allow it sometimes. I mean, I tried to post breastfeeding videos where I don't even show my boob and they mark it as can't can't post this. It goes against guidelines. I'm like, what? It doesn't even have a nipple in it. But like, I just saw someone's vagina the other day, so it's, it's the access to seeing these beautiful births and these doulas and midwives having a voice now and a way for people to hear their voices and women, praising home birth. And yeah, I mean, it could be a multitude of things, from COVID to just yeah, people wanting to get healthier and then going down that rabbit hole. And
The perfect way, I think, to finish this conversation is you talk about in your podcast a lot, holding space, holding the portal open. And I remember listening and I'm thinking, what's this portal? And you do an episode on it and it's fantastic. But it's interesting because I'm reading a Dolores Cannon book at the moment, which talks about the one that I'm reading is Between Life and Death. And she has so many books, but that's just the one that I'm reading about at the moment. And it's all about, the soul stepping into this next life. And there really is this moment. And it's the same when somebody passes away. And I have been there with all of my animals when they have passed. And it's the hardest yet most beautiful thing in the world to do when you're there with another soul and you're present for that moment. You talk about honoring that. And I watched this video last night of a woman talking about her home birth, and her husband was there and they had baby with them. And then they were showing clips of her home birth. And one of the things that they said, and this made me just sort of gasp at the magic of all of this, is that she said, right at that moment, as I pushed baby out, and they used the dog's name, but she hadn't been in there for the entire labor. But as I was pushing baby out, she came in and she witnessed the birth and she was perfect. And I thought, this is about souls being in tune with what's going on around them. I mean, animals are so incredibly intuitive anyway. Our cats have
yeah,
all stared off at something in the distance that we can't see. Cats in Egypt were known to be the protectors spiritually of their people.
yeah,
So I was thinking about all of that and then looking at the other side of this and talking about the doctors. And, as soon as baby's out and they've checked the vagina and they rip their scrubs off, there's not a single ounce of honoring that moment of this new life. Is that how you look at that whole situation?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what it is like when I was doing hospital and home birth and birth center birth, it was like my main thing was like, I just want this mom to have a great birth. But then when I really was like, I don't want to do this hospital birth anymore because I was just crying and I just couldn't anymore. I just felt sick after being in a hospital all the time. And I just started diving deep into home birth and I started really attracting these like very conscious women that wanted these spiritual. I mean, I play singing bowls, I sing. I'm very big on like sound healing and sound energy and just really being present with the magic that is birth and what's happening. If you really think about it, like we've just been so conditioned to like, oh, baby's being born. Yep, okay, congratulations. Go in there, mama, go rock it, but it's like this is a life coming in. This is like a soul entering the world, and it's and so as a doula, that's I try to like set that space, and it's a tangible portal, so to speak, to the other world, to the other side, to God. Like that's the closest you're ever going to be to literally being around, God is everywhere. God is us, right? But that's the closest you're ever going to be to like, whoa. Like this is God. Like this is when a baby comes in to the world and comes out of a vagina and you see them take their first breath, and then just the curiosity in their face and just in the home birth, it's everybody's quiet and that stillness, and there's just like right when the baby's born and everybody's just like being very quiet and just watching the mom and the baby and listening. And it's almost like everything goes like really silent, like right before a tornado or something. And it's just this really cool thing to witness. And in the hospital, it's like bright lights, and this nurse is asking questions, and then they're putting an anklet around the baby, and then it's like there's just so much that's happening in a time and space in the birth that should be like honored